We spend a lot of time on this show trying to filter through the noise, like trying to find that one massive breakthrough or, I guess, paradigm shifting piece of information.
All right, the big stuff.
Exactly. And honestly, we're usually looking for something loud, a massive data leak or a huge scientific discovery, some sort of tectonic shift in industry.
You want the fireworks.
You want the fireworks. But every now and then you realize that the most profound insights don't actually come from a megaphone. They come from a microscope.
Yeah, it's really the difference between reading the big, bold headlines and reading the fine print of how a system actually operates on a daily basis.
Exactly that. And for you listening right now, whether you are, say, trying to untangle a massive project at work, or maybe you're just someone who is intensely curious about how things grow and evolve, we are basically asking you to radically slow down your processing speed today.
We really are.
Yeah.
Because our source material today is definitely not a headline.
No, it is not. It is arguably the quietest, most hyper-focused piece of text we've ever analyzed on a deep dive. And, I am fully aware that we might be geeking out over what appears to be a completely mundane observation.
It sounds super mundane at first glance.
Right. But stick with us because the mechanics underneath it are just fascinating. Finding this source, it was kind of like discovering a single perfectly preserved Polaroid tucked away inside this massive, 983-page photo album. It just captures this very specific moment in time.
And we are going to act as your guides today to really analyze that Polaroid, so to speak, because even though this single source is incredibly brief, it is just packed with insights about life cycles, human interaction with nature, and, well, the virtue of patience.
Yeah, so let's get into it. We are looking at a single entry from a very extensive gardening journal. The entry is titled Notes on Gardening, Part 983, The Fruits of Tecoma Tree.
Part 983. Just wow.
I know. It was published on August 11th, 2026 by an author named Ang, and it is entirely about the physical state of a single Tecoma tree, which is also known as tabebuia-rosea.
A beautiful tree, by the way.
Gorgeous. But when I first pulled this source, I had to stop and just stare at that title for a second. Part 983.
It immediately establishes the context, doesn't it? Like, this isn't a casual weekend observer who just bought a trowel. This is a deeply archival mindset.
I mean, let's just do the math on the dedication here. Ang has sat down to document something happening in the dirt, or, in the leaves, 982 times before getting to this specific tree on this specific Tuesday in August.
That requires a level of stamina that most people just don't possess.
Absolutely. Okay, let's unpack this, because here is where I actually got tripped up in the reading and where I kind of want to challenge Ang's editorial instinct a bit.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because Ang explicitly points out in the text that the blooming season for this Tecoma tree is typically February to April.
Right, the spring window. That's when it puts on a show.
But this post is dated August 11th. We are a month past the blooming season. The flowers are long gone. So from a purely documentary standpoint, why are we dedicating post number 983 to tree when it is specifically not doing the thing it's famous for?
You're wondering why we aren't looking at the flowers.
Yeah. It feels like showing up to a stadium 4 months after the championship game just to take pictures of the empty bleachers.
What's fascinating here is that your assumption, well, it assumes the flowers are the championship game.
Oh, interesting. Aren't they?
Not biologically. I mean, if we look at the biological mechanics of what Ang is actually documenting, the flowers are really just the promotional campaign. Ang specifically notes that they have, quote, managed to capture the fruits of the tree after the blooming period.
That word managed is doing a lot of heavy lifting there.
It really is.
It makes it sound like an achievement, like it's somehow difficult to catch a tree just standing there in August.
Well, it is difficult, cognitively speaking, because human attention is incredibly seasonal. We are biologically wired to notice high-contrast, high-color events.
Like a tree exploding with bright pink spring blooms.
Exactly. But biologically, for the tree, flowers are relatively cheap. They are lightweight, temporary structures designed solely to attract pollinators. The actual energy-intensive, highly complex biological work happens after the petals fall off. Ang is forcing us to look at the seed pods.
The aftermath of the bloom.
Precisely. Ang is capturing the transitional phase, where the tree is quietly funneling all its resources into creating a legacy. True understanding of any system, botanical or otherwise, it really only comes from observing the entire life cycle, not just those flashy blooming periods.
That makes a lot of sense.
Think about like compiling code in software development.
Okay, I like this.
You spend all this time writing the code, that's the flashy, active part. You'd hit compile, And on your screen, it looks like absolutely nothing is happening. The system just sits there, completely static.
Just a loading bar that isn't moving.
Right. But underneath, the processor is maxed out, translating all that flashy code into a functional architecture. If you look at the Tecoma Tree in August, it looks like a dormant, empty stadium. But inside those pods, it's operating at absolute peak capacity.
Wow. Okay, that actually completely reframes how I'm thinking about this timeline. We tend to judge the health of a project or a system by its visible, flashy outputs, but Ang is pointing the camera at the system while it's compiling.
And this is incredibly relevant for anyone listening who manages long-term projects. The periods that look the most stagnant, the unglamorous post-launch, messy transitional phases, are actually where the structural integrity of the next generation is being built.
So Ang isn't late to the party by taking a photo in August.
No, not at all. Ang is just interested in the actual product rather than the advertising.
Which brings us to what that actual product looks like in reality. Because Ang isn't just writing a philosophy paper here. This is a tangible physical observation in a garden.
Very tangible.
Yeah, and Ang describes these fruits, these seed pods, as being, quote, still rather raw or greenish.
The visual indicator of incomplete processing.
Exactly. And the instruction is clear. Because they are raw and greenish, we cannot do anything yet. We have to wait until they turn dark brown or black.
A test of patience.
Totally. Now, I read that and immediately thought of staring at a piece of fruit on the kitchen counter, just willing it to ripen, like staring at a green banana or an unripe avocado, but on a much, much longer time scale.
Right, where every day it looks exactly the same as the day before.
Yes. But what makes this specific wait so interesting to me is the physical scale Ang describes, because Ang explicitly notes that the tree is still small and within the height of a human adult.
See, that is the detail that entirely shifts the dynamic of this text.
Really? Because I kind of want to push back on that for a second. Because Ang says the tree is still small, that just means it's young, right?
Sure, it's a young sapling.
It's not like Ang has carefully cultivated a bonsai Tecoma tree to purposefully keep it at exactly 5 feet tall. It's just a young tree. Are we reading too much into an incidental detail, like it just happens to be short right now?
No, I hear you, and it is absolutely an incidental detail. You're right, it's just young.
Yeah.
But the consequence of that incidental detail is what matters here.
Okay.
In behavioral science, we talk a lot about proxemics, which is the study of how physical space and distance influence human interaction.
Proxemics. Okay.
Right. When a mature tree is, say, 50 feet tall, your relationship to it is strictly macro. You look up, you see the canopy, you evaluate the overall health. You cannot see a single raw greenish pod among thousands of leaves.
Right. It's just a giant green blur against the sky.
Exactly. But because this specific tree happens to be within the height of a human adult, the observation becomes micro. It is literally in Ang's face.
It's right there.
Yeah, and the physical accessibility changes the psychological threshold for observation. Because it's at eye level, it allows for these intense daily micro-observations. You don't need binoculars or a massive ladder to check on the compile status of this tree. You can walk past it on your way to get the mail and notice a 1% shift in color from raw green to slight brown.
It's confronting. When something is at eye level like that, it just demands a completely different type of attention.
It demands daily accounting. And honestly, that's the mechanism of a good journal. Ang didn't get to post 983 by only writing about towering macro events. Archival documentation requires micro-triggers, and an eye-level seed pod is the perfect trigger. It's this localized slow-motion event that essentially forces you to check in daily.
I really like that concept. The spatial constraints actually force the depth of the observation.
Precisely.
Because if the tree were taller, post 983 probably wouldn't exist because the pods would be totally invisible, which makes the color shift, this agonizingly slow transition from green to dark brown or black, so much more intense.
It is intense.
It's like watching concrete cure. Structurally it has to happen. The chemical reaction is taking place beneath the surface, but visibly it's just sitting there being incredibly stubborn.
And that stubbornness forces a decision, which is where Ang's journal entry really pivots from pure observation to actual strategy.
Right. What to do next?
Because once you are hyper-aware of this green pod at eye level, you have to decide how you are going to manage the transition.
Yes, the intervention dilemma. This is where I got genuinely confused by Ang's approach, to be honest. Because Ang presents 2 very different paths forward for propagating this tree, and they seem totally at odds with each other.
Okay, let's break them down. What's the first path?
Okay, so path 1, Because the tree is accessible, Ang says we can wait and harvest it later,
Right.
meaning you monitor the pod, you wait for the exact moment it turns dark brown or black, signaling that the seed casing has hardened and is actually viable, and then you physically intervene.
You take control.
Exactly. You pluck it off the branch yourself, crack it open, and presumably take those seeds to plant them in a highly controlled environment.
That's active management. You are controlling the variables as much as humanly possible.
You are the project manager taking the deliverable across the finish line.
Yep.
But then, literally in the next sentence, Ang offers path 2. Quote, alternatively, we can find seedlings that have sprouted naturally from the fallen seeds.
Passive foraging.
Right.
Yeah.
You just do nothing. You let the pods turn black on their own. You let them burst open whenever they feel like it. You let the wind drop the seeds into the dirt. And then you just wander around later hoping to spot a baby tree that somehow survived the chaos.
It does seem like quite a leap from path 1.
So what does this all mean? Is Ang advocating for tight control or total surrender to nature? Because wait and see if a seedling pops up just sounds like a fancy way of saying, I'm going to be lazy and let the yard sort itself out.
It definitely sounds like that on the surface until you look at the mechanistic requirement of both paths. If we connect this to the bigger picture, you are framing it as a choice between taking action and doing nothing.
Oh yeah, plucking a pod versus not plucking a pod.
But in ecological observation, finding seedlings that have sprouted naturally is not a passive act at all. It requires intense environmental awareness. You have to know exactly what a Tecoma seedling looks like when it's barely 2 inches tall.
Oh, that's true.
You have to scan the surrounding soil without accidentally stepping on it or pulling it up like a weed.
Okay, so it's less about being lazy and more about shifting where your effort actually goes.
Exactly. Let's look at the actual language Ang uses.
Hmm.
For the active harvesting, Ang writes, we can wait and harvest it later. For the natural sprouting, Ang writes, we will need to wait and see.
Oh, wow. They both hinge on waiting.
Right. The methodology of the intervention changes. One is harvesting, one is foraging, but the underlying mechanism does not. Both paths require an incredibly specific type of attention. Ultimately, both intervention and passive observation bow to the exact same master time.
They both require waiting, but it's not like the waiting room at a dentist's office where you just read a magazine and ignore everything. It's a very active, highly engaged waiting.
I like to call it vigilant patience. Nature does not care if you are a hands-on manager who wants to pluck the pod or a hands-off manager who wants to forage for the seedling. The biological clock of that raw, greenish pod cannot be accelerated by your management style.
No matter how hard you stare at it.
Exactly. Whether you choose active intervention or passive observation, you are forced to submit to the timeline of the system itself.
Man, that is a brutal reality check for how we usually operate. If you think about it in a modern context, we are absolutely obsessed with hacking the timeline. If a project is moving slowly, we want to throw more money at it, or install a new productivity software, or micromanage the team to force the green pod to turn black by Friday afternoon.
Or we just abandon the process entirely and go buy a fully grown tabebuia-rosea from a commercial nursery. We bypass the system because we just can't handle the friction of the wait.
We really can't. But Ang, sitting there at post 983, accepts that the friction is kind of the whole point. You cannot hack the compilation process. The pod is raw. It is green. You can choose how you collect the data at the end, harvesting the seeds directly from the branch or hunting for the seedlings in the dirt, but you cannot choose when the data is ready.
And what's really refreshing about this is that Ang doesn't seem frustrated by this at all.
No, very calm.
The duality of the two paths isn't a complaint. It's just a menu of options that both rely on the exact same foundation of vigilant patience. It is an acceptance that some systems simply require time to mature, and your only job is to be present and observant when they finally do.
Which, honestly, for you listening, is an incredible framework to apply to whatever complex, slow-moving system you might be dealing with right now. Maybe you are in the middle of a massive data migration, or you are trying to shift a deeply entrenched corporate culture, or, I don't know, you're just trying to learn a dense new technical skill. You have to recognize when your system is in that post-bloom, raw, greenish
A
phase.
phase where invisible iteration has happened.
Exactly. You just can't force the harvest. You have to build the discipline to monitor the subtle color shifts. You have to track the microscopic progress without demanding an immediate explosion of blooms. It's a true masterclass in patience. Sometimes you just have to wait for the raw, greenish ideas to turn dark brown or black before you can harvest them.
And that leads perfectly into how Eng concludes this tiny, densely packed observation. After laying out the reality of the green pods, the physical accessibility of the tree, and these two distinct, weight-heavy paths for propagation, Ang doesn't offer some grand philosophical conclusion.
Not at all.
There is no sweeping summary about the beauty of nature.
No, the sign-off is shockingly casual. It's literally just 4 words. Till the next post.
Till the next post.
It's almost funny. After all this intricate slow-motion observation, Aang is just like, all right, well, see you tomorrow.
But from an analytical perspective, that casual sign-off is the absolute core of the archival mindset we talked about at the beginning. Till the next post implies that the observation is never actually finished.
Right.
The wait for the pod to turn black isn't a pause in the documentation. The wait is the documentation. It's an unwavering commitment to continuity. Aang is promising to be there for post 984, regardless of whether the pod has changed color or not.
It's the ultimate expression of vigilant patience. It's saying, I accept the timeline of the tree, and I will be here to record it day by day until it's ready.
Which leaves us with a highly applicable and maybe slightly uncomfortable question to consider.
Let's hear it.
We opened this deep dive by talking about our tendency to only look for the loud, flashy, headline-grabbing moments, the blooms. But Aang finds enough structural complexity and enough value in the slow curing of a single green pod at human height to write post number 903.
A completely mundane detail that holds the blueprint for the entire life cycle.
Yes. So the question I want to leave you with as you go back to your day is this. If Aang can extract that much strategic and philosophical depth from a raw, greenish fruit simply by paying close attention, what incredibly minute, slow-moving, eye-level detail in your own daily environment are you completely ignoring right now, simply because you haven't paused to wait and see?